Kia ora koutou, my name's Tom Augustine. Welcome to Point of View. This is your monthly podcast talking about what's coming up in the movies and what's happening out there in the movie world. We have a great show for you today. We're talking to Matthew Metcalfe. He is the producer who has a huge range of credits right here in New Zealand. Very, very impressive guy. His latest film that he's produced is Moss Freud. Really, really wonderful film about the meeting of minds between Kate Moss and Lucian Freud in the early 2000s to produce Naked Portrait 2002. A wonderful piece of art. It's a really, really great film, and it was a real pleasure to sit down and talk to him today, so stay tuned and check it out. Matthew Metcalfe is one of New Zealand's most storied producers, with a list of credits as long as my arm. Very, very impressive resume of films, releasing the new film Moss Freud, which you produced. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I know you've just come in from Cannes, so it's wonderful to have you here.
It's great to be here, and it's a pleasure. It's always good to talk to cinephiles.
Yeah, absolutely. How was Cannes, speaking of cinephiles?
Look, I'd be lying if I said that Cannes, the south of France, is not pleasant. Especially this year, there was no rain. It can often rain, but it was beautiful weather every day, very balmy, sort of 23 degrees with a light breeze. Is worse places to be, I can assure you.
Do you get beach time? Do you get suntan time while you're there?
You do see people swimming while you're there, and Cannes is full of contrast. You've got people literally swimming 5 meters away from you while business deals are going on. It's a funny old place of contrast. But no, I can truly say I've never been in the water in Cannes, and nor have I ever seen a movie at Cannes.
You were saying this before. I find that fascinating, but also I've heard this from other people as well. I guess it's just the amount of stuff to do. Yep.
Look, it's a long way to go. It takes the better part of 30 hours from Auckland to get to Cannes, and it's a busy time, and you're a meeting after meeting after meeting, and I've often thought it would be nice to see a film, but you literally don't have the time.
Yeah.
And there's quite a bit involved in getting a ticket, etc. You've got to go line up, you've got to go, go into a kind of a system where you buy almost like a lottery.
Yeah.
You can put quite a bit of time into this, and honestly, you're there to talk to other people, not to see films, as much as you might want to.
Absolutely. And speaking of a fantastic film, Moss Freud, now I really, really enjoyed this film. I think what's interesting to me is its status as a New Zealand UK co-production before we get into the story itself. So can you explain to me the way in which the New Zealand comes into the making of this film?
Well, look, so Moss Freud was conceived and written by a New Zealander, an Academy Award-winning New Zealander called James Lucas. He's a Christchurch lad who now lives in London. And so he pitched to me pre-pandemic this idea for effectively sort of a shorter film. I think that Sky Arts in the UK were looking to do some sort of 40-minute sort of featurettes for the Sky Arts channel, and he showed this to me to ask my thoughts. And I said to him, look, I love this. If Sky don't do it, I'll do it. And so I don't remember how long it was, but he came back to me maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, and he said, I don't think Sky wants to do it. And I said, well, I do want to do it. And I effectively signed it up on the spot, and thus began the journey. And in fact, probably the last business meeting I had before the world shut down in 2020 was with Kate Moss on Old Compton Street in London. And I remember meeting with her. My memories of that day are meeting with Kate Moss and seeing someone walk the streets with yellow kitchen gloves on, like old school gloves to do the dishes, with gaffer tape around the wrists. So that was my day that day. Meeting Kate Moss for the first time and seeing someone with kitchen gloves on the street.
Stuff of dreams, stuff of nightmares all at once.
All at once.
And so the film is about the very fruitful collaboration between Kate Moss and Lucian Freud, making the astonishing painting Naked Portrait 2002. What was your awareness of this relationship, of this painting? Was it something that you had a passion, or was it that it was just a very interesting point in time to depict?
Look, the majority of the films I've done have been true stories, or inspired by true stories. Not all of them, but the majority. And I have a real soft spot for for stories that are about transformation and the triumph of the human spirit. And what really struck me was the journey that both Kate and Lucian go through. And each really impacts the other for the rest of their lives, and that was fascinating to me. I'm also really into art. You know, I love art. I love going to art galleries. I love reading about art and studying art. And so finding out the story behind the painting was fascinating to me, and I was really attracted to that story.
And one of the things I find really interesting about your career is the way that you have these ongoing fostering relationships with younger artists like James Lucas, who I believe wrote Fenner or worked on the writing of Fenner. Can you tell me, why you feel it's important to foster those kinds of relationships, to bring up new talents and that kind of thing?
Well, look, I think the answer to that is relatively simple. The first thing I have to acknowledge is there was a whole bunch of people that were incredibly kind and probably unearned from my side, generous towards me when I was starting out. And so I think there's an obligation to pay it forward. I wouldn't be here today if a whole bunch of people hadn't have been widely tolerant of me pestering them. And I never forget that. And equally, young artists, they have a vision, they have a voice, and it's dynamic and it's interesting and it's exciting. And James is such a dynamic artist. He has such a wonderful voice, and I loved working with him on Fina, and I loved his take on the relationship between Kate Moss and Lucian Freud. I was genuinely taken by it and really wanted to go on that journey with him and thoroughly enjoyed it.
And Kate Moss served as a fellow executive producer. Did she have sort of consultations in terms of how the story was told?
Yeah, look, Kate signed off on every version of the script, and Kate visited set a couple of times, and she was fascinating on set. Like, I remember she came to the set where the Lucian Freud sort of painting studio set, which is a photorealistic recreation of the actual studio. And Kate just walked in, and it was like, oh my God, this is like throwing me back in time. This is just completely throwing me back in time. She just stood there and stared at everything and said, it's like it was yesterday to me. But she was lovely. She had so much fun that day, and it was wonderful. She was so enthusiastic. Like, she gave this real generosity to the cast and crew and shared stories and was like, and I was over there, and I remember Lucian did this, and it was a lot of fun to have her there.
And I always find it fascinating because, the film is obviously very loving of Kate Moss, but also it's not entirely flattering. There are times where, she's presented in a less than positive light, and then, it does, bring us back. But how open was, obviously someone who is in the public light like that has to be conscious of their image and that kind of thing in something that's about them. So how was that managed?
I think that Kate was incredibly generous during the process. I think she was brave and generous and really warm of spirit. I think for anyone to open up in the way that she did and be honest about the ups and downs of their life takes real bravery. And I've got enormous respect for Kate for doing that. I keep using the word generous. She was generous. She was really giving to the process.
And I suppose it helps that you have this really wonderful kind of breakout performance from Ali Bamba, which to me feels like a real find. Obviously she's been in things before, but this really feels like the breakout moment for her. So can you tell us about finding her, casting her, what went into that and that kind of process?
Well, look, Ali, I first became aware of Ali when she did the trial of Christine Keeler. I think that's for the BBC. And I was really impressed by her. She was very brave. She gave it all. And then she appeared again. I think this was during the pandemic. There was the Netflix show The Serpent.
Yes.
About the French serial killer. And she had this really incredible role in that. And I was so impressed by her. So I remember ringing up James Lucas and saying, have a look at Ali Bamba. I think she's really interesting. And he probably came back to me the next day or 2 days later and said, she's amazing. So we went out to her I think she was the first person we went out to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but well, it makes sense because she really inhabits that role and has obviously the look that Kate Moss had as well. So it's a real serendipitous kind of thing.
Look, Ali, again, I use this word brave. It's easy for us to watch the film and forget. There's months of work from Ali to do that. She gave her all. She appears completely naked in the film. I mean, that's brave, and that's putting yourself out there. And I'm in awe of what she did. I think this is going to do wonderful things for her, and she really deserves all of that. Huge support.
Now, you have obviously a very long, storied career, and you did mention, the beginning of your career and making your way up. And I'm very interested, obviously we don't have a huge amount of time, but I wanted to ask you about those early roots and that kind of thing. I understand that you were in the army as well before that. So I'm interested in the way in which, and knowing producers, I can probably imagine what your answer will be, the way in which the skills that you had in the military translated to producing.
The army was something that I did after school because I didn't really know what else to do, and it seemed really cool. And I enjoyed it for a while. It was fun. It was an adventure. I was 17, 18 years old.
Yeah, right.
You're doing cool stuff like jumping out of helicopters and tanks and APCs and digging a lot of holes. But it was kind of cool. But what it does do is they have this saying in the army, which is adapt, improvise, and overcome. The whole thing in the military is, there's a saying in the military which is, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And I've really adapted that to film to say that, no film plan survives day one. And you can just be assured that when you're filming that things will go wrong. I mean, here's a true story. We once made a music video for a band called The Feelers, right? The New Zealand band The Feelers. And
Classic.
We went out to the red centre of Australia. So if you're old enough, you remember Qantas used to do these television commercials and what they call the red centre, which is where the dirt sand is red. And so we went out to this place called Windora. It's 100 kilometres from where the border of Queensland, South Australia and New South Wales intersect. It had not rained in this part of Australia for years. So we go out there because it hasn't rained for years.
Oh, no.
And then it rains on us. That's what I mean by no plan survives first contact in the film business. We go somewhere where it hasn't rained for years and it rains for us. I always joke, if there's anywhere you want to make it rain, just get a really expensive film crew to go there for which they desperately need it not to rain, and you can be assured that it will rain.
I mean, within the New Zealand industry specifically, which is ever-changing and morphing and all of that, I imagine that kind of adaptability and that ability to hit the ground running and be like, what are we going to do to make this work is something that is essential for a producer.
You just have to really come at every problem with a sense of, okay, I'm going to try again, and then I'll try again. There's an old saying, which is Robert Rodriguez, El Mariachi fame, is sort of, I'm bastardizing what he said, but his view is that anyone can make a perfect film with unlimited time and unlimited money. The party trick is to make a great film with limited time and limited money and 1,000 problems. That's the real trick.
Absolutely. And so, Moss and Freud, how do we see this film? When is it coming out? That kind of thing.
Well, I believe Moss and Freud hits New Zealand cinemas later this week. So I would say check all the good listing guides. I'm sure it will tell you where to go, but it's a very beautiful film. There's been several screenings, and we've had some private screenings here, and I'm very proud of the fact that many people have come out wiping tears from their eyes. It's a very moving and heartwarming story. Very enjoyable. And
clearly a labour of love for everyone involved. So congratulations again on this film, and thank you for making the time to speak with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cheers. We have a busy month for films in June. It's going to be a very, very packed month filled with really, really interesting titles. Kicking off right at the start of the month, on June 4th, we have the release of 3 really interesting, very different films. We have The Christophers, which is from Steven Soderbergh, stars the great Ian McKellen and Michaela Cole, and it's about art forgery. Soderbergh is in a slightly interesting state in his career. He's still churning out movies. The feeling generally is that maybe he's lost a bit of his edge, although the film Black Bag that came out last year was really great. So there's reason to be optimistic for this one. Now, another film that's a big blockbuster from Mattel, who obviously were the people who released the Barbie movie, is Masters of the Universe, which is, based on the iconic He-Man franchise. Now, if you've watched the trailers, they're bad trailers. It looks really bad. But I have heard some underground chatter from some critics that I know and trust that the film is better than the trailers suggest and might actually be good, if you can believe it. So I will be watching, and it's got some good talent involved, so let's see. Now, another film that I've just seen recently is Power Ballad. I actually really like this film. It's a film with Nick Jonas and Paul Rudd, and it comes from the John Carney, who made Once and Sing Street and a whole bunch of other films, and it's about a kind of aging rocker who is part of a wedding band who one night by chance runs into one of the biggest pop stars in the world, played by Nick Jonas. They write this song together, and then Nick Jonas's character essentially steals the song, and it turns into a massive hit, and it's about this man's kind of quest to get recognition for it. It's a film that initially seems like it's going to turn into something kind of treacly and sentimental, but it's a lot more hard-edged, and there's even a little bit of bitterness there that's really, really interesting, and it cuts through the sweetness in a really nice way. Paul Rudd, really great performance, one of his best, I think. Under the radar, but worth seeking out. June 11th, we have two big tentpoles about as different from each other as possible. We have Spielberg's new film, Disclosure Day. Now, this one also has some slightly shaky trailers, although I will say when I saw the big trailer in IMAX before a film, it hit different, and it has a different feeling. This is his return to the world of aliens. Obviously, this is well-trodden territory for him, War of the Worlds, Close Encounters, etc. This is a new take on that. There's always reason to be excited for a new Spielberg, no matter how you feel about different works of his. Now, the other film that's coming out is the return of the Scary Movie franchise, which is the, beloved but also quite ridiculed spoof franchise of the 2000s. Now, a lot of these 2000s titles are having a bit of a comeback, or even prior to that, we had The Naked Gun and other films like that with these kind of more spoofy, more like light-hearted versions of comedy that take virtually nothing seriously. And so we can see the reason why Scary Movie is coming back. They have brought back Anna Faris and Regina Hall, which I think is the important ingredient for this. We will see if they can turn it into something worthy of those great spoofs like Airplane and The Naked Gun. June 18th, we have the release of Toy Story 5. Now, the general feeling, I think, amongst a lot of critics is that this series probably should have ended with the very, very good Toy Story 3. Toy Story 4, I didn't mind, but definitely felt like an inessential item. Whether Toy Story 5 continues that trend or is a real comeback for the series, we will see. Leviticus is an interesting horror film, which, we don't know that much about, but has gotten really, really good reviews outside after its festival premiere earlier this year. And we also have The Death of Robin Hood, which comes to us from Michael Sarnowski, who is the director of the very, very good film Pig with Nicolas Cage, as well as A Quiet Place Day One, which was better than either of the other Quiet Place movies. Very, very good film. The Death of Robin Hood stars Hugh Jackman, who kind of looks to be doing a little bit of like a Logan take on the character of Robin Hood. Listen, the trailers didn't fill me with confidence, but let's see whether they can pull something out of the bag. June 25th is the real arrival of the summer blockbuster season. We have the arrival of Supergirl. So this is the follow-up to Superman. All eyes are on this because Superman was the kind of arrival of a new DC universe. and it was a success, but with caveats. And whether or not James Gunn's vision for the DC universe can be maintained by, in terms of financial success and also critical success. So we will see whether or not this film, which stars Millie Alcock from House of the Dragon, can live up to that name. We also have an animated film, the new Minions movie. This one is going to obviously be a huge blockbuster. Minions and Monsters. Now, usually I wouldn't talk about this kind of film, but this one does seem to have some sort of interest in film history and classic horror cinema in a way that suggests that maybe there's something going on underneath the hood there. So we will see. We also have the final Jackass movie. Now, there is a kind of growing critical consensus that the Jackass movies are worth revisiting in terms of their kind of cinematic value. Jackass Best and Last is as it says, the final outing for the Jackass franchise. Sure to be a hit, sure to be a continuation of all the things that series does so well. So that one's worth looking out for as well. Every Thursday night in June on Rialto Channel we have Beyond the Screen. These are a series of documentaries about some of the greatest filmmakers and films to ever be made. We have some really, really special titles here, and I wanted to highlight a few. So the first one is Godard's Cinema. So obviously this is about Jean-Luc Godard, the father of the French New Wave. Very iconoclastic, very daring, provocative, world-shaking filmmaker whose visions for how we could use film in certain ways broke cinema and then remade it. He is a very fascinating figure, and any documentary that kind of dives into his life and his work is worth watching, in my opinion. We also have Alien: Terror in Space. Now, Alien is a film that is endlessly rewatchable. You can find something new in it every single time. It is an incredibly deep, incredibly terrifying, incredibly powerful film, and it's one that stands the test of time, even though the alien himself is a guy in a rubber suit. It's a fascinating story of how it was made. Alien: Terror in Space dives into that story. It's a really, really wonderful thing to watch. Now, the last one I wanted to highlight is Chaplin's Modern Times: The Path of Silence. Now, Charlie Chaplin, obviously probably the most prominent figure in silent cinema in the modern day, the one that people remember. Modern Times, widely regarded as probably his best, or one of his best. I studied it at university. It's a fascinating film again, a very, very incredible kind of feat of performance, filmmaking, athleticism. It's a very, very cool movie, well worth watching if we can get over the hump of, it's a silent movie. So this is the story of the making of that film and why it endures to this day. Chaplin's Modern Times: The Path of Silence. There's a new streaming service in town. This one is for people who are looking for a real depth and breadth of really quality film in the truest sense. Film and documentary. I'm talking about RialtoView, which is a new streaming service that has a really wonderful catalogue, which is just growing every day. RialtoView.com, you can head over there. You get a 7-day free trial if you sign up. And I'm going to be talking about my picks that you can find on that service month to month. I want to start with this one because it is a collection that has been made in conjunction with the Italian Film Festival, and it is one of my favourite filmmakers of all time, Roberto Rossellini, the incredible master of Italian cinema, a filmmaker who is known for his neo-realist visions, his collaborations with his future wife, Ingrid Bergman, a very, very impressive body of work, which you can find on RialtoView. Some of the greats, Rome Open City, which is a portrait of the city post-fascism, and Journey to Italy, Voyage to Italy, which is a fascinating kind of story of a relationship on the rocks with the great Ingrid Bergman. And then, of course, Stromboli, which is set on the incredible volcanic island Stromboli, again with Ingrid Bergman. Incredible film, one of my favorites of all time. Highly recommend you go and check this out on RialtoView.com. That's all from us here today at Point of View. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name's Tom Augustine. We'll be back next month with more news from the movie world and recommendations of what to watch. Ka kite.